Welcome back. This video is to demonstrate how to create a food program registration and how to indicate participation in that food program. We are going to assume that at this point in time that the household has been created, that the household members have already been added to that household. And so we're going to be focusing on the registration and participation portion here. If you're unsure as to how to do the household, create the household, or to add the household members to that, I would reference the video that is focused on that. So here, what we're going to do is for the food program, it is actually stored in the household folder, as we do indicate participation by the household and not by the individual. And so what we're going to do is there's actually a couple different ways of going about this. The way that I strongly recommend is still searching for the client. And for this exercise, we're going to use Bob Boberson here. And again, as I noted earlier, that the food program registration information is located in the household folder. That is where we need to go. So what we're seeing here right now is actually the client's information. And so if I clicked on any of these items, it would take me to specific information for that client. But instead, we want to actually go to the household. And over here where we see the household links, if I click on this button here, I see the household record. I'll go ahead and click on that. Now this takes me to the household's information, but the registration forms that I need to access are actually in its folder. So I'm going to go over here and click on View Folder. And there we go. You can see that there's only really two forms that exist for the household. Really the food program is pretty much the only exception as to where we store information based on the household and not on the individual. So then what we're going to do is here, Create New. You'll see it pre-populates for the fiscal year, so you won't need to add that information. And if the registration is occurring that day, that information will be correct. But if it's not correct, just make sure to change it there. And then what you're going to do is indicate where or what food program it is. As you can see, people can actually register for multiple food programs. It just depends on the circumstances and the requirements of each of these food programs. Here we're looking for annual household income. It doesn't have to be precise. We don't verify income or anything of that nature. And so what this process really entails is getting an approximation of how much that individual has for income. And so we'll just say that this person has $20,000. And if we go here, we're finding out if they have food stamps or not. If you aren't sure, you can click incomplete. If they've applied, you're going to indicate that as well, or if they have it, you can mark yes. Or if they're newly unemployed within the past 6 months, this question is here because of a specific funder that is requiring that information. And so, and then there's a couple of additional entities, and these questions do vary from time to time, so this may or may not be here right at the time that you're viewing this video. But what this is ultimately triggering is some additional prompts for referrals to agencies that Community Action Network is working with. And so here, CAN, for example, does have an established relationship with Michigan Works. And so if the client is interested in some type of employment-related services, certainly indicate yes. Make sure you also notify your supervisor as to what process needs to occur in order to kind of complete that referral process. And likewise for this healthcare insurance assistance, whereas if there is a client that indicates a interest in receiving that type of assistance, certainly mark yes and then notify your supervisor on that interest so that we can complete the referral. Here you'll notice some little question marks. If you hover your thing over it, it'll give you some additional tips as to what needs to occur for this specific question. And then this last one here, this is a question that pertains to one of the outcomes that CAN is trying to achieve, which is ultimately seeing and trying to improve the food security for the households. And so here what we're looking for is whether or not anybody in the household is actually skipping meals. So just obtain that answer, or if it's unknown, you can mark unknown. And then if there's any additional notes for the registration, let's say there's a language barrier, so you weren't able to get some information, at this point in time you could say that, yes, there was a language barrier. What this will also help do is if there's additional caseworkers that might interact with this client, they might be able to obtain some of this earlier information through whatever resources might be available at that time. And then so we save this record, and at this point in time we have now created the food program registration. So at this point in time, for the remainder of the fiscal year, ultimately what we're doing is just adding participations in the food program. And that is done by going down here for this participation, clicking add. So if it's your first time accessing the database, there's a good chance that this is actually what you'll end up seeing, which is no additional search engines. You see pretty much all of the different food programs. It can seem a little bit cluttered. There are some good ways of decluttering that for yourself. One of which is by adding some search fields. And so let's say you're at a specific site. You're going to want to then select that specific food program. And so what this does when it populates is it now limits the participation records for that specific site. But we can take this actually a step further and have it just look at the current fiscal year. And there we go. So this is the point in time where we're looking for the participation records for the Bryant Food Program in this example for fiscal year 2014-2015. So every time that somebody comes through and we're creating a new record for them, we're going to access this specific record and then click New. And you'll see that it popped up an additional window. It already pre-populates the current date. Again, if that's incorrect, and then just make that adjustment, and then indicate the type of participation for the food program, if it's an emergency food pantry visit or if it's a large distribution visit. We'll just say this is a emergency food pantry. And for certain sites, there is a USDA form that is required. This does not apply to all sites, so consult your center director or supervisor to see if this is something that you need to complete at your site. And if not, then you don't really need to worry about this and the steps that come along with that part of the process. So to complete our participation for the food program, we're going to just save this record. I'm actually going to close out this tab and let it repopulate or refresh for the food program registration. And here we see the Boberson household with a completed food program registration for fiscal year 2014-2015, and then now here a mark of participation for that individual. Another thing to note here is that certain sites may have limitations on how many visits that they can make per month. Again, consult your supervisor as to how many of those visitations are allowed. And this is where you would ultimately look and see if they've exceeded or if they're at the amount of visitations that they have in regards to that program or type of participation, such as like the emergency food pantry or large distribution visits. And it's good to be in a regular habit if you're at a site that does have limitations to reference this before creating a new record in case a client is utilizing the program more often than what they should be. Alright, and that concludes how to do a food program registration and to mark participation for the household in that program.